Morning, John.
Morning. It's lonely in here. Hey, there's somebody else.
Good morning.
You happy now?
Say again? Yes, I'm happy.
All right, this is a test because Ben thinks he's hearing us.
I am hearing you loud and clear.
John,
Yes.
I think I sent you a text to your home phone the other day. You didn't get a text from me, right?
No, you need. I gave you my home phone, but I think I gave you my cell too. Do you need that?
Yeah, no, but I just wanted to tell you that I was thinking of you Sunday and hope you had a meaningful, unveiling service.
Thank you. It was. I appreciate that, Mike.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the last number you gave me was your phone number, and so I think I inadvertently sent it to them. I was just thinking.
All good.
All right, Boker Tov, everybody. Good morning.
So, did you walk, Rabbi?
We're going to get started this morning. Page 6 would be a Birchot Shachar, thanking God for a brand new day. We ask that if you're able, you please rise. Page 6. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan l'sech b'vein halevchim min yom u'vein hayla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani b'tzamho. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish sharumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rokar etzal hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa li kol tzarki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, metin mitzadei gavzer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, mozer yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, mozer yisrael b'tifara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, natan liya'ef koach. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam. Otneinu hayom v'choyim lechanu chesed arachamim beinechem v'nechtareinu v'tigmalinu chasedim tovim Baruch atah Adonai v'mel chasedim tovim le'amo Yisrael. You may be seated, page 7. Yehiraton v'ilchanecha. They've been great. Running, keep the casket. Ashrein hamatov chokinu manayim gorleinu mayafa yerushateinu ashreinu shanachnu mashkim yamarivim erev avokev hermim pamayim bechol yom Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Abba Kadesh et Shimcha Makdishei Shemecha Vekadesh et Shimcha B'Olamecha V'Yishuata Tarim V'Tag V'Yakarneinu Baruch Atah Adonai Vekadesh et Shimcha B'Rabim Atahu Adonai
Eloheinu B'Shamayim Yivarech.
Kabetz Koivecha. That's Choose our rabbinic text to study between pages 9 and 12. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ma Talmud Omer.
Rabbi Yishmael Omer.
Page 12. Yehir hatzad milchanech Adonai Eloheinu v'lo yavoteinu shetiten chalkeinu b'toratecha v'niyam itamidad shel Aaron HaKohen ohev shalom v'rodef shalom ohev et habriot makor b'adnat Torah. Page 14, Psalm 30. Mizmor shir chanukat avayid David aram mimecha.
David aram charanayki.
Start there. F'mispiri lemacholi b'taktas akiveta jeni simecha lemani zemercha chaba b'loida Adonai Elohai le'olam b'otecha. Please rise for Baruch She'amar, page 16. Baruch She'amar v'yaolam baruch hu Baruch Baruch Shema Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu
Shema Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu.
Yachlit Chayol Hamni Melech Meshubach V'Deir Shema Gadol Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Me'olam V'Tishbachod. You may be seated, page 17. Adul Adonai Kiruv Yishmod. Shir Adonai Kol Haaretz. Kol Elohim Himelithim Adonai Shemayim Asa Hod V'Hadal Lefanav. Page 18. Adul Adonai. Azir Roman. Ramhem Adonai Eloheinu v'yishtachvu l'har kodsho ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu v'hurach l'michaper avo. Page 19. Zukor rachamecha. Unoten. Adonai tzvah asher lo b'teach b'ach Adonai Yoshia melech yaneinu v'yom koreinu Yoshia et amnecha v'chanach Ani bechastecha v'tachti ageli b'vishuatecha asher l'Adonai ki gamal halai mitzvot v'torah v'l'nai kol haaretz. Hivdu en Adonai b'simecha, hivdu en Adonai b'simecha bo lefana b'nana, lefana b'nana. Hivdu en Adonai b'simecha, hivdu en Adonai b'simecha bo lefana b'nana, lefana b'nana. Diddy-die, 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 yum-bum. Diddy-die, die-die, diddy-die, 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 yum-bum. Diddy-die, 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 yum-bum. Die-die, die-die, diddy-die, 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 yum-bum. Die-die. Ibdu and Adonai Besimecha, Ibdu and Adonai Besimecha, Lefana Binana, Lefana Binana. Ibdu and Adonai Besimecha, Ibdu and Adonai Besimecha, Lefana Binana, Lefana Binana, Deoki Baruch Shemo Ki Tov and Le'elam Chasta V'Edravador and Donata Yehichavar Adonai Le'elam Shema Kol Goyim Atzat Goyim Ve'hurach Lam Yechaper Aban V'lo Yeshchit Ve'eval Shiva V'lo Yerkol Chamato Adonai Oshia Melech Yaneinu Ve'yom Koreinu. Page 21, Ashrei. Ashrei, Oshrei Beitecha, Odilu Chased, Ashrei
תאחד ידיך ומשפיע כוחך רצון, צדיק אדוני בכל דורות.
Tehillat Adonai Pivi Varech Vasashim Kochel Elamahed Vanach Varch Yamet Amed Olam Hallelujah 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 Nafshi Adonai Adonai Shomer Kerim Yatzal Me'amanad Yoded B'derech Hashem Yavet Imlach Adonai Le'elam Elohech Tzion L'dor V'ador Hallelujah Hallelujah Kitab Tamar Eloheinu page 23 Magid Rabbi Yaakov, Kaveh Mishpatav L'Yisrael, Asachen L'Kol Goyim Mishpatim B'Yirahum. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Page 24. Hallelujah. Eshuvach Shem V'Kitom. Vayarhem Karen Le'amot Yilalecho Fasitav Livnei Shalom Krovo. Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Shir Adonai Shir Chadash.
נשמח ישראל ביסם ציון, יגיעו במחר.
Leisor Malchechem Bezikim Nechbedechem Rechav Levos Lasot B'Mishpat Katuv. Hadalecho Chasidav, hallelujah. Middle of page 25, Psalm 150. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Birki HaHozah. Hallelujah, Bigor HaTav. Hallelujah, Kerov Godlah. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Hallelujah, B'teka shofar. Hallelujah, B'nevel v'chinor. Hallelujah, B'tofum hachor. Hallelujah, B'minim ve'ugav. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Hallelujah, B'tziltzilei Shama. Hallelujah, B'tziltzilei Juha. Kol Neshama Tehalel Ya. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol neshama tehallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Baruch Adonai. Baruch Adonai Elohim Melech Yisrael Senivdot Devato Baruch Shem Kavod Le'olam Dimech Chodet Kol Haaretz. Amen ve'amen. Please rise, page 26. Vayavarech David et Adonai. That's it. אתה הוא אדוני אלוהים אשר בחרת באברהם ביוצא תמר כסדים ושמת בשמו אברהם מצאת לבבות נאמן לפניך בחרות עמו הברית בארץ. וים בקתה לפני ויבוא בתוך ים ביבשה ואת רודפי משלחת מצות כמו אבן במים עוזים ויושע אדוני ביום ההוא. page 27. וירא ישראל את היד הגדולה אשר עשה להם ממצרים ויראו את אדוני ויאמינו באדוני משה עבדו אז ישיר משה לבני ישראל. מי כמוך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. כי לאדוני המלוך משה בגויים ועלו משים בארצו לשפוט את הרי סב. ויטל אדוני המלוכה ויהיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ויום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. page 29. ישתבח שמך ליד מלכנו. ברכות והלכות מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני, המלך אדום ותשבחות, על העלאות הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך אלפי העולמים, יתגדע ויתגדע שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, וחיי חון ומחון וחיי לכל בית ישראל, בגלה בזמן קריב ימרו אמן, יש מי רבה מברך לעולם עולם יומיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי לקודשה בריחו, ולהאמין כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעמך וימרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אדוני אלוהים מלך העולם. יוצר אור וחושך עושה שלום וברא את הכל. You may be seated 5 lines down on page 30. המאיר לארץ ואדוני מלך המרחמים. גניונך המלך המרחם. ברוך גדולתיה. page 31. כולם אוהבים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים וכולם עושים בהם אוויר רצון קונם, וכולם פותים מביעים בקדושה וטהרה, בשיריו זמרם ברכם שבחים, ובהרים ומעריצים, מקדישים וממליכים את שם האל המלך הגדול גיבור והנורא קדוש הוא. וכולם מקבלים עליכם במלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה להקדיש אותם בנחת רוח בשפה ברימת הקדושה, כולם כאחד עונים ואומרים ביראה, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, ולכל הארץ כבודו. ואופנים וחיות הקודש, בראש קדומים ישימו מטרפים לעומתם, משבחים ואומרים, ברוך כבוד אדוני, ממקומו, ברוך כבוד תיתנו. Or Chadash Al Tzion Zahir V'nizkech Olano Meher Aleoro. Or Chadash Al Tzion Zahir V'nizkech Olano Meher Aleoro. Baruch Atah Adonai Yatzeh HaMeorot V'Rabatanu. Page 32. Yavinu leshalom me'abakan v'taretz v'toichenuk v'mi'at eretzenu ki apal yishrot tata v'namachvartu mikol ha'melashon v'gerabtanu l'shimcha gedol sela be'emet v'hodot l'chayt v'cham be'ahava Baruch atah Adonai Abochei be'amo Yisrael be'ahava Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha B'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'atecha ve'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shirantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'beitecha u'v'lechtecha v'derech u'v'shofecha u'v'kumecha u'kshartam lehot al yadecha ve'hayu l'totafot bein einecha u'chnaftam המזוזות ביתך ובשעריך והים שמות היום Sí, sí.
אני אלוהיכם, אשר עשיתי אשריכם מארץ מצרים ליוספכם לאלוהים, אני אלוהיכם אמת.
אדוני אלוהיכם אמת, ויציב לכם בחיים וישר. אמת. לדור ודור קיים ושמו קיים, וכיסו נכון למלכותו ומנותו לעד קיים, לדבר חיים בקיימים. אמני. אמת. אמת שאתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, מלכנו מלך אבותינו, גואלנו גואל אבותינו, יוצרנו צור ישועתנו, פורינו מצאנו מעולם שמך, אין אלוהים זוהרתך, עזרת אבותינו אתה ומעולם. Page 35. כן משיח ברם עולמו שלך. ישמע. Sure. Tehillah Elyon Baruch Moshe Bnei Israel Chanu Shira B'simcha Rabba V'amru Chol Ha'am Mi Chamocha Ba'alim Adonai Mi Chamocha Netar B'Kodesh Nur HaTehillah Tosef Eleh Shira Chadasha Shibechuglim Leshimcha Svatayam Yachad Kulam Hodu Bimlichu V'Amiru Adonai Eloh Le'olam Va'ed. Please rise. Tzor Yisrael Koma Be'ezrat Yisrael Ufteinu Mecha Yehuda Be'Yisrael Kohaneinu Adonai Tzvahot Shemo Edosh Yisrael Baruch Atah Adonai Gal Yisrael We'll begin the Amidah together on page 36b, continuing together through the Kedusha on 37, and then going silently the rest of the way through our Amidah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu Elokei Abraham Elokei Yitzchak Elokei Yaakov Elokei Sachar Elokei Rivka Elokei Rachel Elokei Leah Ahel HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanora El Elyon Mel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei HaKol v'Zocher Chasdei Avot u'Mevi Goel Livnei Bneihem Leman Shemo B'Ahava Melech Ozer Foked u'Moshiach Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham u'Foked Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayim Eitim Atah Rab Le'Oshia Morid Hatal Mechakel Chayim Bechesed Mechayim Eitim Rachamim Rabim Somech Nofim Berofech Olim Amatir Asurim Mekayim Emanatol Ishenei Afar Micham Hochava Gevurot U'Meidameha Melech Memhit Mechayim Matzmiach Yeshua B'nei Achayot Meitim Baruch atah Adonai Mechayim Meitim Nekadesh et Shimcha Ba'olam Kishem Shema K'shimot Lo B'Shmei Marom K'Katzav Hayad V'Yecha V'Karazel Ze'V'Amar
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech Haaretz Kevodo, Le'umatam Baruch Yomeru.
Baruch Kivod Adonai Mimkamo.
Baruch Kivod Adonai Mimkamo, Divrei Kodeshecha Katuv Le'mor.
Yimloch Adonai V'Yolam Elohai Tzion V'Dor Hallelujah.
Yimloch Adonai Le'olam Elohech Tzion, L'dor V'Tor, Hallelujah. L'dor V'Tor Nagid Godecha, Netzach Netzachim Kedushatcha Nakdish, L'shivchacha Eloheinu Mipinu Lo Yamush Ki Melech Kadosh V'Kadosh Atah Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh.
Amen.
If you're still praying the Amidah, feel free to continue. Otherwise, we continue with short Ta'achanun, beginning on page 62. Page 63. Shomer Shomer Yisrael Shemo Sherit Yisrael Shomer Shomer Yisrael Shemo Sherit Yisrael Ve'alayovad Yisrael Ve'alayovad Yisrael Omerim Ahomrim Shema Yisrael Shomer Goy Echad Shemo Sherit Amechad Shomer Goy Echad Shemo Sherit Amechad Ve'alayovad Goy Echad Ve'alayovad Goy Echad Am Yachadim Shimecha Adonai Elohim Adonai Echad Shomer Goy Kadosh Shemo Sherit Am Kadosh Shomer Goy Kadosh Shemo Sherit Am Kadosh Ve'alayovad Goy Kadosh Ve'alayovad Goy Kadosh Am Shalashim Ve'shalosh Kedoshot Lekadosh Mirat Sebrach Avinu Malkeinu V'anachnu nirmam. Zreinu Elahation all the Bakvot Shmecha V'atzinu V'chapeach V'tatinu Leman Shemecha. Please rise for Chatzi Kaddish, page 64. It's got Shmeir Haba Ve'halam Hadi V'rakirute V'yam Lechmachute V'chayechon V'mechon V'chayerech Obet Yisrael V'agala B'zman Karhi V'meru Amen Yehesh Shmeir Haba V'farach Ve'alam Olam Me'almaiha Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitbar V'yishraman V'yidnase V'yitata V'yitale V'yitala Shmeri Kodesha B'richo Ve'elam Yikol V'yichatza V'shirata Amen. You may be seated. Ashrei, page 78. Ashrei, Ashrei, פותח את ידיך, קרוב רצוני ויעשה שמנו. תהילת אדוני דבר פי בדרך בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד, ואנחנו נברך ימת עבד עולם הללויה, למנצח מזמור דוד ינך. אדבר. הקרוב אנחנו come to the Nito, Adonai Oshia Melchian, Inavayam Korenu, page 80, Uvalet Zion, Kolos Abechashbek, Adonai. Ve'harata Kadosh Shabti Israel, Bekarzel Zeve'amar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvod, Medoch Haaretz Kevodo, Kadish. Vatisa Eini Ruach Veshma Forai Korash Gadol Baruch Kibad Adonai Mimekom Adonai Yimlach Melam Bayim Yach in the Bavim Orech Atifat HaTzedek Baruch Elohim Yinatzam ויבטחו בחיות שמך, כי לא עזבת ראשך אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה ויאדיר. Please rise for Kaddish Shalem, page 82. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, והלמד דברה קדרתי וימליך מלכותי, וחייכון ומחון וחיי לכל בית ישראל. בגלה בזמן קריב במהרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם עולם יומיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי לקודשה בריחו. ואל המין כל ברכתה ושירתה. תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא במהרו אמן. תתקבל צלות הנבותון בכל ישראל קדם ובון ובשמיא במהרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיא וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל במהרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל במהרו אמן. Going to turn to page 152 as we'll be counting our Omer. We'll be doing the English paragraph I'm ready to fulfill on 152. We'll say the blessing right below, Baruch Atah Hashem. Then we'll turn to page 156, right? Yes, 156, as we'll be counting the very first number on page 156. The day before last night was the 37th day. So we'll be counting the number that comes after 37. Back to page 152. I am ready to fulfill the mitzvah of counting the Omer as it is ordained in the Torah. You shall count from the eve of the second day of Pesach, when an Omer of grain is to be brought as an offering. 7 complete weeks. The day after the 7th week of your counting will make 50 days. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat haomer. We turn to 156 as we count. Hayom shmona ushloshim yom shehem chamisha shavuot ushlosha yamim laomer. Today is the 38th day of the Omer. That's 5 weeks and 3 days of the Omer. May they hold a blessing for all of us. We turn back to page 83 for Aleinu. Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר ראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצון, ולא שמנו כמשפחות אדם, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד Mourner's Cottage, page 84. Yitzgadal v'yitzgadash shmei Rabbah ve'olam ha'divra kidurtei ve'amlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayid v'chol Beit Yisrael v'agala v'zman kariv v'yimeru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah levarach le'olam olamei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromham v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kodesha b'richo la'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechmata damiran ve'alma v'yimeru amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shmaya, L'chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'yimeru Amen.
Amen.
Osei Shalom Bimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'yimeru Amen. You may be seated. Psalm for Wednesday, page 87, middle of the page. Hayom Yom Revi'i B'Shabbat. Lechon heran henan Adonai nariel etzor yishenu nekad mafana betzoda bismiro narielo ki hel gadol Adonai umelech gadol al kol Elohim. We firstly want to extend our condolences to the family on the very tragic passing of Lisa Starr Rosenstein. The funeral will be today at 11 a.m. at Agudas Achim Memorial Gardens. Rabbi Scheinberg will be officiating that. So we're sending our thoughts and prayers to the family at this time. We also continue to send our condolences to the families during the Shloshim periods of Ronald Joseph Ronnie Ratcliffe, Lenore Karp, and Linji Sintracool. And we remember the Yort sites this morning, Wednesday, May 5th, of Elliot Matthews and Philip Dennis Melnick. If you have additional names to add, feel free to do so at this time. Final Mourner Scottish is found back on page 84. Yitzgadol v'yitzkadash me'raba ve'olama tivra kirutei ve'amlich malchutei v'chayechon uvyom echon u'v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael V'agala v'bizman karhi v'yimeru amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevarach le'olam olomei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramham v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shmei d'kudesha b'richu. Le'ela minkol b'rakata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechmata. Damiran be'alma v'yimeru amen.
Amen.
Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shmaya, V'chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'yimeru Amen. Osei Shalom B'imramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'yimeru Amen. Boker Tov, everybody. Good morning. Yasher Koach to all y'all for helping us to make a minyan. We appreciate it. I'm going to be teaching Talmud in just a bit. Again, the funeral, if you're wondering, is today at 11 at our Memorial Gardens, Agudas Achim Memorial Cemetery. Rabbi Avram Scheinberg will be conducting it. Otherwise, no pressing announcements in the next few days that I can think of. Next week, there are some things, but we'll wait till next week to let y'all know. So if you're sticking around with us, great. If you're not, either way, we hope you have a great day. I'm going to take off my stuff and I'll be right back. Boker Tov, good morning, everybody.
Boker Tov, Rabbi, and thank you.
Elsa, good morning.
Good morning, Bruce. How are you today?
You have a good day. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. I'm going to catch you now on the computer.
All right, let's do this. Oh, getting old in the joints.
That's because it's LA living.
Huh?
That's because it's Los Angeles living. That's why you're
Yeah,
getting
exactly. I was going to say, when you're from LA, you just age a lot quicker than everybody else because you're living life at its fullest 24/7. So, all righty, let's get going. We're going to talk about it's funny, I titled this Suffering and Repentance, but really it's not such a downer. I mean, it's the story of somebody getting sick and ultimately dying, but hey, there's stuff to learn about that too. So anyhow, it starts in kind of a fun place. We're going to be studying Sanhedrin 101A. If you want to follow along, you can, again, find the link on the Google link is near the Facebook page. If you don't have Facebook, but you have a friend who can get you the link, yeah. Or if you're here in person, you can have the page right here. I printed off 7, but we only used 3. So what can you do? The sages taught, one who reads a verse from Song of Songs. We know Song of Songs, right? So Song of Songs is tied to the Jewish holiday of Passover, ultimately. It's supposedly written by Solomon, the king, and it can be in praise of Israel and the relationship between God and Israel, but it also can be seen as what it looks like, which is erotic love poetry, right? So this is important to know because of the next part. One who reads a verse from Song of Songs, the erotic love poetry, and renders it as a form of secular song rather than a sacred text, and anybody who reads any Bible verse at a banquet house, not at its appropriate time, but just as a song, those people introduce evil into the world as the Torah girds itself with sackcloth, right? Sackcloth we wear when we're mourning. The Torah girds itself with sackcloth and stands before the Holy One, blessed be God, and says before God, Master of the universe, your children have rendered me like a harp on which clowns play. Oi, right? Okay, so here we go. Before we keep going in the story, what has happened? The sages teach us it is really bad to treat holy texts like they're just, silly songs, right? We have this really important Bible. We have this really important Song of Songs, and there are going to be parts of it which you're going to be tempted because of their erotic nature or the silly things written in them or, I don't know, the catchy rhymes, whatever it is. You might want to go sing that in the bar. You might want to go to your friend's banquet and just start belting out this tune. Don't do that, right? When you do that, you introduce evil into the world because you're taking something holy and you're making it chol, you're making it profane, you're making it just a silly, regular thing, but it's a holy thing. You're taking something sacred and ruining it, right? That's what they're saying here. And what happens when you do that? The Torah puts on mourning clothes. The Torah says, oi, the world is coming to an end. I can't stand this, God. Look what your children are doing. They're playing me like a harp. They're acting like clowns. They're taking a beautiful instrument, me, the Torah, and they're making me into something for a puppet show, right? This is not honorable for your Torah. How dare they, right? So watch what happens. God says to the Torah, my daughter, interesting, during the time that they are eating and drinking, what should they be doing, right? So it's funny. The Torah comes and says, oh, God, it's so messed up. The people are messing around with Torah. They're just playing me like a harp. But it's not meaningful. And God says, well, they're eating and drinking. What are they supposed to do? They're bored. Entertain them. So the Torah says, master of the universe. If they're masters of Bible, then let them study more Bible. Study the Torah and the prophets and the writings. That's Tanakh, right? That's Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. That's the whole thing. So if they're just studying one thing, let them study all 3. If they're masters of Mishnah, the first layer of the oral Torah, then let them study Mishnah. And if they study Halacha, and let them study Mishnah and Halacha and Agadah, right? So Mishnah is, again, the oral Torah. Halacha, it's kind of weird because it becomes more codified in our time, but Halacha is Jewish law. And then Agadah is legends and stories, right? And usually homilies for meaningful moral, ethical lessons, right? Not just stories for fun. So if they study Torah, let them study all 3 parts. If they study Mishnah, let them study all 3 of these things. If they are masters of Talmud, let them engage in the study of the halachot of Passover on Passover, right? In the study of halachot of Shavuot on Shavuot, and in the study of the halachot of Sukkot on Sukkot, right? So why these 3 holidays? Because those are the Shalosh Regalim, right? We have 3 significant holidays that are the pilgrimage festivals, and these are them, right? It's Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. So if there's masters of Talmud, they need to study these 3 things, right? That's what it says. Don't treat the Torah with contempt. It's not for your entertainment, although the Torah is rather entertaining at times. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar testified in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Hananiah, Anybody who reads a verse at its appropriate time in the appropriate manner introduces good into the world, as it's stated, and a word in its season, how good is it? Funny that we started in Song of Songs, which is a Solomon text, and we end in Proverbs, which is a Solomon text. Very crafty sages, but it's nice. It's really nice, right? So we start in the place of the Torah complaining. Well, they start in the place of oy vey, when you take something holy, a holy verse, and you make it profane and you sing it in a body bar, as a drinking song or something. Shame on you. Then the Torah comes. We have the story. The Torah comes to God and says, it's not fair. They're treating me so poorly. And God says, I don't know what you want me to do about it. And the Torah says, look, right? If they're going to do studying of Torah, let them really study Torah, right? That's what they should do. If they're really good at it, don't let them screw around. Let them pursue more studies. And then they come in and they say, and when you teach Torah in its right place, when you read Torah in the right place, not in the bars, not when you're having a drinking party, but in meaningful ways, then you put good in the world instead of evil, right? It's the flip. When you put it in its place, good enters the world. When you do it wrongly, evil enters the world, right? Torah is not a game. It was given to you as a gift, but it's not yours to just use however you want. Okay, so that was section 1. Great section. Really, really great section. Section 2, this is going to be a story. Rabbi Bar Chana says, when Rabbi Eliezer fell ill, his students entered to visit him. Rabbi Eliezer said to them, there is intense wrath in the world. It is due to the wrath of God that I am suffering from these afflictions. So we had this idea. We've talked about it way back in Barachot. If you were with me two years ago, year and a half ago, we talked about it. It's called Yisurin Shel Ahava, which is afflictions of love. There's an idea that you get what you pay for. We've talked about that, right? Cheshbon nefesh, you have a arithmetic, you have a certain scale, and God pays you back. So if you do 2 sins, you get paid back for 2 sins at some point, whether it's in this world or the next world, right? They believe in 2 worlds. If you're good, you get the world to come in the next world. You have this world right now. And if you sin in this world, while you could get paid back in this world, punished in this world, you could also get punished instead in the next world. There will always be an equal balance, but you don't know if you're going to get paid back here or there, right? And it's true of the opposite too. Let's say you're a really good person and you do like 50 mitzvahs. You might not get paid back for any of them here. You might get paid back for all of them in the next world. You'll get paid back. God is fair and just, but we don't know where, right? That's important to know, because when somebody righteous seems to be suffering, they get sick, they start to die, etc., they might say it's not fair, right? It's not fair. And then, look, you could reason it out as, well, God is going to give me a lot of rewards in the next world, and therefore I'm not getting any of them here. Or there's the idea of Yisurim Shel Ahava, which says God punishes those God loves. If God loves you, God will afflict you because God knows you can handle it. And that way, in the next world, you'll get tons of rewards because you've endured extra suffering here, right? I'm not asking for this sort of thing. Some of the sages were into it, right? They said it's how they rationalize their suffering in the world. Otherwise, it's hard. You just seem to be suffering for no reason, and that sucks. So this way they can say it's meaningful. So that's what Rabbi Eliezer says. He says, well, there is, God is out there, and God is angry in this case, and so I'm suffering afflictions. So he's not taking it well, right? He's not saying, yay. He's saying, oi, this is terrible. His students started to cry that their teacher was suffering, and Rabbi Akiva started laughing. This is not the only time Rabbi Akiva laughs when everybody else is having a bad time, right? Actually, this happens a number of times when the temple's destroyed and everybody's crying, and Rabbi Akiva is laughing. Rabbi Akiva has a different viewpoint on the world. Is he wrong? He might be crazy, but probably just has a different way of seeing the world. So Rabbi Akiva's laughing, everybody's crying. Why are they crying? Their teacher is dying. He's laughing, his teacher is dying, right? That's not why he's laughing. For what reason are you laughing, they say, because this is totally a social faux pas. You walk into a cemetery, a funeral, and you start laughing and everybody else is crying. It's going to be pretty obvious. They're going to be pretty upset. So they're upset. They say, why are you laughing? He said, why are you crying, right? As though like his behavior is normal, but theirs isn't. So they said, is it possible that this amazing guy, Rabbi Eliezer, who is like a Torah scroll, is afflicted with pain and we will not cry? Interesting, Torah scroll. And we just saw a Torah scroll. So he is dying. We're crying because he's dying. That's sad. And he's really great. He's our teacher and he's wonderful. Rabbi Akiva said, that's why I'm laughing. right? Ooh. Good thing it doesn't end there. He says, that's why I'm laughing, because he's dying. As long as I would see for my teacher that neither does his wine ferment or spoil, nor is his flax stricken, nor does his oil spoil, nor does his honey turn rancid, I would say, God forbid, my teacher already got his reward in this world and therefore won't get it in the world to come. Oh, see, it's the reasoning I was talking about. You have a balance. You get paid back a certain amount. Rabbi Akiva says, this is why I'm happy. I'm laughing because I'm happy. Why am I happy? Well, I was worried because if my teacher doesn't suffer, what happens? Then maybe he's paid out all of his rewards in this world, which means in the next world, he gets nothing. I don't want to see my teacher with nothing in the next world. So seeing his stuff all doing well, right? If his wine doesn't ferment and his honey doesn't go bad, it means that God is giving him rewards here right now, which means God won't give him rewards in the next world. That's bad. So I was worried about that. But now I see my teacher suffering, so I'm happy. He's not happy because his teacher's suffering because he hates his teacher. He loves his teacher. But the way this arithmetic works means if his teacher's suffering now, in the next world, he will be getting rewards, right? So that's why Akiva's happy. He says, yes, suffer more. Give him more suffering, right? That's what he wants because it means in the next world, his teacher's going to be in paradise, right? So they really believe in a next world. Otherwise, this is just a jerk move, right? That would just be awful. So no, it's good. He's happy, but he's not happy because he likes seeing his teacher suffer, except for the fact that it means his teacher will not suffer in the next world. But he's not like, yeah, you're dying, right? He's like, good. God is doing justice with you, which means in the next world, because God is just, you're going to get rewards. Good. So Rabbi Eliezer said to him, Akiva, my student, have I failed to fulfill any portion of the entire Torah? Well, this is chutzpah, by the way. I mean, maybe he never has, but you know, when you're dying and then you say to somebody, have I ever made a mistake in my life? Right? Like, okay, right? And then Rabbi Akiva, of course, is pretty rational. And he says to him, Ecclesiastes, look, we're getting all of Solomon in this section. He says to him, you taught us, our teacher, you taught us, there is not a righteous man upon earth who does good and sins not, which is such an important lesson, by the way, as a side note, to always remember, no matter how good you think you are, already by the time of Ecclesiastes, they recognize that even the most righteous among us make mistakes, right? If you ever run into somebody who thinks not, refer them to Ecclesiastes and it should put them in their place. Great. Okay. So he says to him, right? Or the Eliezer says, I'm amazing. I'm the Torah scroll. Have I ever made a mistake? And Akiva says, you taught us everybody makes mistakes, right? Everybody has those days. Good. So that's the first version of the story. But now they're going to tell the story a little different about the same instance, but different. That makes sense. All right. So the sages taught when Rabbi Eliezer fell ill, 4 sages entered to visit him. Rabbi Tarfon, we know him. Rabbi Yoshua, we know him. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, we definitely know him. He's a Nasi at some point. And Rabbi Akiva, and we know him, right? So these are 4 huge Gedolim rabbis in the tradition. And I've taught all of them in rabbinic personalities because they're all super important. Rabbi Tarfon responded. So their teacher is ill, so they're going to talk to him. Rabbi Tarfon responded and said to the teacher, Rabbi Eliezer, you are better for all the Jewish people than a drop of rain. As a drop of rain provides benefit in this world, but you, my teacher, you provide benefit in this world and in the next world. That is a nice thing to say to somebody, right? His teacher is ill, and he says to him, you are more important than rain, and we love rain. Rain keeps everything going in this world. But you're better than rain because rain doesn't really exist in the next world. But you not only make this world better, you'll make the next world better. Wow, right? Nice, Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Yoshua responded, and he said, you, my teacher, are better for the Jewish people than the sun. As the sun gives benefit in this world, but you, my teacher, you give benefit in this world and the next world. Wow, that's a nice statement, Rabbi Yoshua. The sun, it maintains all life here, but you, my teacher, maintain life here and there. Wow, right? Rain, the sun, this is nice. What's going to come next? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah responded, and he said, You, my teacher, you're better for the Jewish people than a father and a mother, than guardians. As a mother and father can provide benefit in this world, but my teacher, you provide benefit in this world and in the world to come. Wow, you are the father and mother of the generations, not just here, but in the next generation, in the world to come. You're loving and comforting and great. You're supportive, right? The world is dependent upon you. Wow, Rebbe Elazar ben Azar, that's a nice statement. Look at these rabbis. They come in and they say such nice things to their teacher. You are important. Now watch what Rabbi Akiva says. He's always a little different. Rabbi Akiva responded and he said, afflictions are cherished, right? Was that nice? Is that a good thing to say to somebody? Somebody's dying and they're getting sick. They're dying and you say to them, I'm glad you're sick. It's good to be sick. It's enjoyable to have a cough or to have the flu or to have cancer, right? Like, you're not saying exactly that, but it's kind of what he's saying, right? They all say the world is dependent on you. The next world's dependent on you. And Rabbi Akiva says it's good to suffer. Right? All right, cool. When Rabbi Eliezer heard this, he said, pick me up, my attendants. I want to hear what Akiva, my student, has said. He said, afflictions are cherished. And Rabbi Eliezer says, how do you know that, Akiva? Right? He wants to learn Torah with us now. He doesn't care to address any of the statements that were said previously. He just wants to know about this one. Afflictions are cherished. How can you say that? Rabbi Akiva said, I interpret a verse. It says Menashe was 12 years old when he started to reign, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem, and he did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord, right? So this is how I learn it. Menashe was 12. He reigned a while. He did bad stuff, okay? And it's written, again, Solomon, these two are the Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of Hezekiah, the king of Judea, copied. So Hezekiah taught Torah and gave it to everybody. So is it conceivable that Hezekiah, the king of Judea, taught Torah to the entire world, but Menashe, his son, who also became king of Israel, he did not teach Torah to, right? That's hard to believe, right? It says he taught everybody, and yet he didn't teach his own son. How did his son get so wicked? He should have learned Torah from his father, Hezekiah, who taught it to everybody, right? So how could it be? Rather, here's what it is. Hezekiah definitely taught Menashe, his son, much Torah, but nevertheless, from all his exertion to teach him and all his toil to teach him, it was only afflictions that elevated him to the path of good, right? So Menashe might have learned tons of Torah, but it didn't actually help him turn away from evil. The only thing that helped him turn away from evil was being afflicted with suffering. How do we know that? Because it says, and the Lord spoke to Menashe and to his people, but they would not listen. So the Lord brought upon them the captains of the army of the king of Assyria, who took Menashe with hooks and put him in chains and carried him to Babylonia, right? So he gets captured and tortured because he's the king of Israel, and the Assyrians come and they conquer, right? So they come in and they capture him and they put him in chains, and he's being afflicted and suffering. And then it's written, when he was in distress, he sought the Lord his God and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers. And he prayed to God and was entreated of him, and he heard his supplication, and he brought him back to Jerusalem into his kingdom. And then Menashe knew that the Lord, he was God. And so you learn that sometimes you need the rod and not the carrot to get back on the path, right? And so this is Akiva. It says, the way I know that afflictions are good is because sometimes afflictions, being beaten by God, actually brings you to repentance, turning back to the right way, right? And so too here, you being punished now with sickness is not a bad thing. It's actually a great thing. You should be happy. God is giving you opportunities to change your life around for the better. You can take it seriously. I have limited time here. I need to make amends for the things I've broken, the relationships that need to be repaired. I'm getting sick. Now is the time to fix things, right? So while all the other statements are beautiful, they don't require action, right? All the other statements are, you're great. Don't worry, you're great, which is nice if you're trying to reaffirm for somebody that their role in this world is done. And they shouldn't worry about death because it's not the end. But Rabbi Akiva says something slightly different, which is, look, you should be glad that you are being afflicted because afflictions can lead you to a better place in your life. You still have work to do, right? And that's really a better way, I think, of seeing it, in that way we don't criticize Akiva for saying something that seems out of place, because actually his statement is also beautiful, but in a different sense, right? So he teaches that. That's how we know it. So then they move on. But they're talking about Menashe. So there's a great story about Menashe. I love this. which we'll finish with. With regard to Menashe, right? Menashe was king of Israel. He did what was wicked in God's eyes. He gets captured. He turns his life around. He comes back and he does tshuva and he's better, but then he dies. But at least he turned his life around at the end, okay? So he definitely worships idols. With regard to Menashe, initially he called to multiple gods and his prayers were not answered. And ultimately he called to the God of his forefathers with the demand, if God does not answer my prayer, then apparently all the gods are equal to the God of my forefathers, right? So basically, Menashe starts in a place of idolatry, but he does end up in a place of worshiping just God. And that's good, okay? So the issue is he did idolatry. So watch this. One day, Rav Ashi ended his lecture just before reaching the matter of the three kings, right? There are three kings who, they did some not great stuff, right? Mostly idolatry. We know this. If you read the book of Kings, you find that there are many kings who are not great and they don't really do great for the people. And a few of them help to promote idol worship. It happens. So he says, it's the day before they're going to teach it. He says at the end of his lecture, tomorrow we'll start the lecture with our colleagues who, although they were sinners, right? Although they were sinners, they also studied Torah like us, but our colleagues, we're equals, right? Menashe, king of Judea, came and appeared to him in a dream, right? So if somebody comes to you in a dream, you better be scared because it's not just a dream. There's some truth to it. Well, if it's a good dream, I guess it's fine. Don't be scared. But here, be scared. Menashe, the king of Judea, showed up in his dream that night. And Menashe said to him really angrily, you called us your colleague and the colleagues of your father. How dare you consider us equals? I was Menashe, the king of Israel, and you are small compared to me. And you said we're going to teach tomorrow our equals. We're not equals. We're not colleagues. We're not friends. I'm greater than you, right? So Menashe said to him, I will ask you a question. He's going to ask him halakha to see how great he is. From where are you required to start cutting a loaf of bread when you recite hamotzi, right? Where do you start cutting the bread? And Rav Ashi said, I don't know, right? Rav Ashi is great, but he doesn't know. I don't know. Where do you start cutting the bread? Menashe said, even this, from where you were required to begin cutting a loaf of bread when reciting hamotzi lechem min haaretz, you did not learn it, and yet you call yourself my equal? You think you're a good rabbi? You're not a good rabbi. I was a good rabbi. I knew the halacha. I knew where to cut bread. You don't know anything, and you think we're equals, right? Ooh, bam. Did you know Menashe knew more halacha than the great Rav Ashi? Well, he did. Great. So, it's great. Rav Ashi said to Menashe, teach me. I would love to know. Please tell me where to cut the bread. And tomorrow I will lecture and I'll say it in your name during my lecture. Right? Like, okay. He's like bribing him. He's like, I want to know. Like, I'll give you the credit, but like, tell me. I really want to know. Okay. Really funny. I love this story. So he says, here's where you cut the bread. You cut it from where it crusts as a result of baking. So we learn halakha in the name of Menashe, the king. The king from thousands of years ago. We know halacha from him, right? You start where it crusts as a result of baking. Rav Ashi said, wow, you are so smart. You are so smart. Why did you do idol worship, right? Now he's flattering him. You were so great. Why did you turn away from God for a while, right? So he wants to know. Menashe said to him, had you been there at that time, you would have taken and lifted the hem of your cloak and run after me because everybody wanted to do idol worship at that time, right? It was like a popular thing to do. Like you think you're great because you don't worship idols, but you would have given in to peer pressure in half a second. You're a nobody, Rav Ashi. You would have given in too. That's why I did it. I didn't do it because I'm bad. It's because the desire was so fierce among everybody. They would have killed me if I didn't do it, right? Okay. The next day, Rav Ashi said to the sages, we begin with the treatment of our teachers, those who are greater than us, right? So he changes his tone after he has the scary dream. It's like a Fiddler on the Roof moment, right? Fruma Sarah shows up and all of a sudden, they're like, oh, never mind, right? So Rav Ashi, he starts out a little chutzpan. He's a little, whatever. He thinks highly of them, of himself and the rabbis, and he thinks lowly of those who would turn us away toward idol worship. But then he gets visited. So he's like, our colleagues, right? Oh, those who are equal to us. And he's comparing himself to a king of Israel. And like, okay, not a big deal because It's like an idol worshiping king during part of his life. But Menashe takes exception to that, and he shows up in his dream and he says, "You dare to think we're equals? Do you even know how to cut bread right?" And Menashe, and the answer, of course, Rav Ashi's like, "No, I don't." And then he's like, "Really? And you're going to say we're equals? Don't call us equals." And then he's like, "Please teach me how." And he's like, "Here's how you do it." And he's like, "Wow, I'm going to tell everybody you told me, but I want to know, why did you worship idols?" And he's like, "I worshiped idols because everybody worshiped idols, and you would have too. So don't think of yourself as a great person." A little humble check there. Slam it to him. And then of course, the next morning, Rav Ashi has been humbled, and he says, "Our teachers, this is what our teachers, those who are greater than us, taught," right? So a bit of a slam, but it seemed to be necessary for Rav Ashi here. It's delightful. I've never, until I was preparing the sheet, I'd never seen this story. I love it. So good, right? But anyhow, what did we just do? You're probably wondering. You're like, wow, we did a lot of stuff. So we started in a place of not profaning sacred things, not taking holy scripture and making it into a drinking song. And we had a story of the Torah complaining to God. They're doing that. And God said, "I don't know how to help you. What can I do?" And then the Torah said, "Well, here's what I think they should do. If they think they're masters of Torah, instead of turning it into a drinking song, they should study more Torah. There's always more to study. Don't waste your time secularizing the Torah. Keep getting deeper into what Torah really means," right? You'll never run out. And when you do that, instead of bringing evil into the world by profaning something holy, you bring more holiness and goodness into the world. You have to do it in the appropriate manner, right? So there's a way to do Torah and a place to do it and a place not to do it, right? That's interesting. Then we had the story of Rabbi Eliezer told two ways. Rabbi Eliezer gets sick. He's going to die. His students cry because they don't like seeing their teacher die. Rabbi Akiva laughs. They say, "Why are you laughing?" He says, "Why are you crying?" They say, "We don't want to see our teacher die." Rabbi Akiva says, "I'm laughing because punishment means God cares," right? You're going to get rewarded in the next world if you're punished here. And I was worried he wasn't going to get punished here, but he is, which means he'll be rewarded in the next world. Good. Then we have the story again, slightly different. Rabbi Eliezer gets sick. 4 students come in. 3 students say, "You are incredible. You're greater than the sun. You're greater than rain. You're greater than mom and dad. And the next world depends on you, as does this one." And then Rabbi Akiva said, "It's good to get afflicted," right? Suffering is good. And then they said, "How do you know that?" And he said, "I know suffering is good because Menashe suffered, and it turned him away from sin into a path of righteousness." And he brings the verse. And we know Menashe did some idol worship, and then ended up not doing idol worship. But it took a while. He had to get beaten. So then we have a little story of Rav Ashi, who's going to teach about Menashe and 2 other sinner kings the next day. And before he has the chance, he has a dream. Well, he says, "I can't wait to teach about our wicked colleagues," or whatever. You know, he's not so polite or honoring. And the rabbis do care about honor. He's not so good about saying nice things about them. He gets visited by Menashe that night. And Menashe says, "You think we're equals? You don't know the first thing about Jewish law." He proves that's true. He knows where to cut bread. Rav Ashi doesn't know where to cut bread. Just to begin with, Rav Ashi says, "I want to teach this in your name, and I want to know, why did you go after idol worship?" And Menashe says, "Don't be such an arrogant guy. Like, you too would have worshipped idols if you lived when I did," right? So there you go. And then the next day, Rav Ashi changes his tune and he says, "Our great, great, great teachers I'm teaching today, not those who are equal to us, because these guys were much greater than us." I'm sure he doesn't say that he saw him in a dream. That would have creeped all the students out. So that's sort of the section. It's kind of fun. I would say the one thing, and I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts, the one thing that really ties it together for me is, well, maybe 2 things actually. But there seems to be, one, the idea of Torah and how Torah is important, and yet there are times and places for it. And that also means there are times and places not for it, right? So on the one hand, Torah should be said and it brings goodness into the world in the right spot. On the other hand, look at what happens with Rabbi Eliezer. He says, "I'm Torah. Torah is me," which means I should be fit for the world, perfect for the world. And Rabbi Akiva says, there are other things in the world. And no matter how much you might think Torah is always the appropriate thing, it's not always the appropriate thing. And sometimes even the best fall down and make mistakes, right? And so there are other things in the world, and one of them happens to be suffering, right? Torah and suffering don't really go together, and yet both are tools. If Torah is the carrot, then suffering is the rod, right? And both of them shape you up to be the right sort of person you should be. And it's not so bad to suffer sometimes. Sometimes that's the only way the message gets through. And they bring examples of Menashe, and they show that he knew both Torah And he suffered, and ultimately his suffering is what changed him over to goodness, not his Torah, right? His Torah could only get him so far. He knew everywhere bread was cut, and yet he too wanted to worship idols. And Rav Ashi, you too would have wanted to worship idols. Sometimes what it takes is being, I hate to say it, but let's just, whatever. Sometimes punishment is the way to straighten somebody out. Torah goes far. It teaches vast lessons, and sometimes you need to have other lessons to really get to a place where you can be proud and glad of what's going on in the world, right? So it might not be the lesson you like. You might say, this is horrible. But look, at the end of the day, we're not going to misrepresent the Talmud as something that it's not. The Talmud says Torah is great. It also says that sometimes afflictions are necessary. We can see all the other rabbis seem uncomfortable, but they don't disagree. They're uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, it's hard. The world has suffering in it, and they don't know why it's there. And so this is one way of rationalizing it, right? And if this is helpful for you, rationalize it the other way. If it's unhelpful for you, then just leave it as a thought that they thought, and they're archaic, and we don't care what they think, or anywhere in between. Up to you. All right. I would love to hear anybody's thoughts, sharing, etc., comments. Yes, Bob, I see your hand.
Yeah, I thought that the little bit bothersome for me on this text was that, first of all, I think you read text to get joy out of life. That if you're brought closer to God, you get joy out of life. And secondly, I've always kind of liked Jacob as a patriarch, because he was kind of saying to God, show me the money. I mean, you want me to believe in you. What's going to come to me with that? And he wanted that life. It wasn't something that was dependent upon a world to come. So if you look at, like Eastern European Jewry, the Baal Shem Tov and everything, they wanted joy out of life, and they could find a way to get joy. But to be simply the subject of oppression or poverty, and the idea that well, you're suffering now, but in the life to come, you'll have peace and tranquility. I don't think that's the covenant. That is, it certainly wasn't the covenant that Jacob understood, and it is basically what I believe either.
Great. Yeah. And again, I mean, and it's a good point to point out, right? Like, we don't have to subscribe to the thoughts of some of the rabbis or the Talmud or whatever, right? I agree with you. I think it's a rabbinic construct. The world to come is found, the proof for it. I mean, people will say it's definitely in the tradition and whatever, in the Bible, but they have to do some loop-de-loops to figure out. It never explicitly says like, oh, the world to come, oh, you'll get heaven for sure. Right? Like, we don't really see that at all, especially in the Tanakh. And so, at the end of the day, I think subscribe to what is meaningful to you. I think for some people, having a world to come gives them hope, right? But for others, I agree, right? I think it just depends where you're at and what you're looking for. And yeah, I don't think Jacob was like, oh yeah, this is how it's going to work or anything, right? That system. I agree with that. Yeah. Dr. Ozer and then Phil.
I think it's interesting that like you say, I think it depends on your construct. I noticed in an article in the New York Times this morning that, in trying to explain this tragedy that occurred in Israel last week, that if you approach the Haredi, their immediate response is like collective mourning and introspection, and that it was a divine message that these people that suffered, that died, the 45 were chosen by God to atone for the sins of the entire generation, and that we need to repent more. And so if you subscribe to that construct, that's a way of explaining this. It doesn't make it easy for us necessarily to subscribe to that, or you can have different viewpoints of it. And I think that is fascinating. There's always room for repentance. And I just want to know, though, what if, with regard to Menashe, what would happen if the bread was underbaked and there was no crust?
Have to get the best way to get the attention of the sages is to insult them in public. So then you have a bad dream. Yeah, I don't know, but it's a good point, and I agree. I think perspective is so much of right. Like the Jewish people, it's the whole thing about like 2 Jews and 3 opinions. I think it's about figuring out what works for you and working through that, and also being willing to understand whether or not you accept. I don't think we have to accept other people's opinions. I think we have to be willing to be tolerant of the fact that not everybody's going to think like us, for sure. Yeah, Phil, you want to come up here? Phil's going to come on up. Come on up, Phil.
Good morning, everybody, and Yasher Koach, Rabbi. So one of the things that jumped out at me, first of all, I love the quoted teaching, for there is not a righteous man upon earth who does good and sins not. I think that important tenet and straight from Ecclesiastes. So more anecdotally, I always like to say that wisdom doesn't come cheaply. When we see someone who appears to be very wise, typically it means that they've been through some suffering or some hard time, because wisdom isn't cheap. Now, not everyone who goes through suffering becomes wise, but when you see somebody who appears wise, often it means they've been through some hard things. Then on a lighter note, after all, yesterday was the Star Wars Day. I'm reminded of a quote from the wise teacher Yoda: failure is the greatest teacher, or as he would say, failure the greatest teacher is. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts.
Thanks for that, Phil. That's great. Even tied in a timely Star Wars. Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that there's definitely that Ecclesiastes quote. I love the idea of, look, at the end of the day, we want to think we're righteous. We want to think we get what we deserve when we're good, etc. And sometimes we forget that everybody makes mistakes, right? Even the great rabbis. So something to keep in mind. Anything else?
Ben.
Yeah, Miguel.
Well, this is what I'm thinking. Indeed, suffering can lead to very intimate moments with God, but joy, when you're joyful and you say, Modeh ani, that's also a very intimate moment. So intimacy with God is always available. Moments of joy, moments of pain.
Great. I love that. I agree, right? There are different ways of reaching God, and God is present in both the hard and the easy, and in the fun and the challenging, right? And that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Great. Thank you. All right. Well, I appreciate y'all sticking with us. This is fun. We have a few more weeks of Sanhedrin, so it's gonna be a blast. We're gonna end it on a high note, and we're wishing y'all a great rest of the day. Boker Tov. Good morning.
Take care. Thank you very much, Rabbi.